All right, so we're going to talk today about polynomials day 3, and we're going to continue talking about multiplying binomials. So in this first one, you see you have x plus 3 and the whole quantity is squared. So if the square is right next to the parentheses, what it really is saying take x plus 3 and multiply it by itself. So what this really means is x plus 3 times x plus 3. So if you remember from yesterday, we're going to double distribute or FOIL this. So x times x will be x squared. X times 3 would be plus 3x. Then on the bottom, we're going to do here, again, 3 times x, that'll be plus 3x. And then 3 times 3 would be 9. Once again, those middle terms are going to be your like terms, so you're going to add those together. And you'll have x squared plus 6x plus 9. Now, you're going to see, if you do enough of these, there's a pattern that starts emerging from this. So in order to do this, what you really do is you take the first term and square it. So the step one will be to square the first term. And then for your middle terms, you're going to multiply the first and the second term. Together, and then multiply by 2. And then your last one would be to square the second term. Now it's really up to you. You can go ahead and write it out and FOIL it out like we did yesterday, or you can use this pattern. It's going to come out the same either way, so do whatever is convenient for you. So if we take this pattern and let's apply it to this one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to square the first term. Well, 3x squared is the same thing as saying 3x times 3x. So that will be 9x squared. I'm going to multiply the first and the second term together, and then I'm going to multiply by 2. So 3x times negative 5 would be negative 15x. And negative 15x times 2 would be a negative 30x. And then I'm going to square the second term. Well, negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25. Let's go ahead and FOIL this out and just see that we get that same exact answer. So this is the same thing as saying 3x minus 5 times 3x minus 5. So let's go ahead and multiply those two together. I'm going to get a 9x squared. I'll multiply those two together. I'll get a negative 15x. I'll multiply those two together. I'll get a negative 15x. And I'll multiply the last two together, and I'll get a plus 25. My middle terms are my like terms. So I'll get 9x squared minus 30x plus 25. So you see, I get the same answer regardless of which way I prefer to do it. All right, if we look at the second page, now we're can't see that, can you? Oops. We're going to look at the second page. Now we're going to multiply something that is called a conjugate. And what a conjugate is when you have two parentheses where they have the same exact numbers, but one is a plus and one is a minus. So this has a little bit of a different pattern than the one we just did. Let's go ahead and multiply this out and see if we can see the pattern. So I'm going to multiply the first two together to get an x squared. I'm going to multiply the first and the last together to get a negative 6x. I'll multiply these two together to get a positive 6x. And I'll multiply the last two together to get a negative 36. My middle terms are always my like terms, but now I have a negative 6x plus 6x, so those actually add to 0. So all I have left is x squared minus 36. So now let's take a look at what this pattern looks like. Well, x squared comes from multiplying the first two terms together. So all I have to do is square the first term. So you're going to square the first term. Well, those middle terms add up to 0, so I can just ignore those. And all I have to do is square the second pair, or really multiply those last two together. So I'm going to multiply the last two together. And I'll always get something that'll look like this. A squared minus B squared. That's what it's always going to look like. So let's go ahead and try that pattern on this one and see how that works. So I'm going to take the first thing, I'm going to square this one or multiply those two together. It's really doing the same thing. 2x times 2x will give me 4x squared. Now I'm going to multiply the last two together. So negative 3 times positive 3 is a negative 9. Let's go ahead and FOIL this one out like we did on the first page and see if we, in fact, get 4x squared minus 9. Multiply those together to get a 4x squared. I'll multiply those two together to get a plus 6x. I'll multiply those two together to get a minus 6x. And I'll multiply those two together to get a minus 9. My like terms will cancel out, and I have 4x squared minus 9. So once again, you can see that, yes, it doesn't matter whether you multiply them out or if you work using the pattern. Once again, do whatever you are more comfortable with. Multiplying it out might take a little bit of an extra step, but sometimes it's hard to remember the pattern. So do whatever you are more comfortable with. But remember, the pattern has to be when you have the same exact things in both parentheses, but one is a plus and one is a minus. All right, let me know if you have any questions.